The perfume still lingered on the gift bag when Julia found it. Sweet, expensive, unmistakably not hers. The silver lid of a milk bottle sat crooked beside it, stained with a faint spot of nude lipstick. And on Andrew's shirt collar, one strand of long blonde hair. She didn't scream. She didn't even breathe for a moment. Because this was exactly what she had warned him about months ago. If you ever meet her again. Main scene. The mansion was silent except for the newborn's tiny breaths. Julia stood in the nursery, wrapped in her silk robe, her hands trembling as she adjusted the baby's blanket. The clock on the wall blinked 11:47 p.m. Andrew wasn't home yet. Again. The glow of her iPhone 15 Pro lit up the room. A message appeared. Lydia, I left the hotel already. Thank you for today. Her world didn't explode. It folded in on itself. Julia had fought so hard to believe this marriage could survive. The therapy sessions, the promises, the pregnancy complications. Andrew had sworn Lydia was a mistake from another life. And Julia, naive and exhausted, had chosen hope. She remembered his words when she almost lost the baby 7 months ago. You just rest. I'll handle everything. But now she realized he hadn't been handling everything. He'd been handling her. Julia packed quietly. One duffel bag, a folder of legal documents, a bottle of formula, her trench coat. Every movement was precise, calm, like she'd rehearsed it in her head 100 times. When the baby whimpered, she whispered, It's okay, sweetheart. We're leaving the cage. She took one last look around the room. The Tiffany lamp Andrew had bought to celebrate the baby, the custom bassinet from Fifth Avenue, the silk curtains fluttering with the cold Connecticut wind. All those luxuries, and yet, it never felt like home. Julia slipped on her coat, pulled the hood over her head and walked down the staircase. Each step echoed like a heartbeat she was leaving behind. Outside, rain whispered against the marble steps. A black sedan waited at the gate. Mark, her old law school friend, sat in the driver's seat, his face pale under the drizzle. Ready? He asked. She nodded, clutching her sleeping baby close. Don't look back, she said, her voice barely audible. The gates opened slowly. Julia didn't turn around as the mansion faded into darkness behind her. She'd left it all, the betrayal, the empty promises, the ghost of the woman she used to be. Ending beat, hidden cliffhanger. As the car merged onto the highway toward Manhattan, Julia rested her head against the window. The city lights shimmered through the rain, distant and cold. Mark glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Julia, he said softly, you did the right thing. She didn't answer. Her hand brushed against the sealed envelope inside her coat pocket. Documents Mark had helped her prepare weeks ago, just in case. Divorce papers, asset protection, custody claim. She had warned him once. Now she would let the consequences speak for her. The rain had stopped by the time the car crossed the Manhattan Bridge. Dawn light crept across the skyline, tinting the glass towers gold. Julia tightened her grip on the baby's blanket, feeling the soft rhythm of his heartbeat against her chest. Mark parked in front of a quiet brownstone in the Upper West Side. You can stay here, he said, unlocking the door. It's my sister's place. She's abroad for a month. Julia nodded, too tired to speak. Her body still ached from labor. Her C-section scar stung each time she moved. 2 weeks since the delivery, and already she was running. But at least she was free. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of lavender and coffee. Julia laid the baby in a portable bassinet by the window, then sank into the couch. Her phone buzzed. 6 missed calls from Andrew. Then one voicemail. Julia, where are you? Stop being dramatic. You know I love you. Let's talk when I'm home. She pressed delete without hesitation. The word home didn't belong to her anymore. Mark placed a mug of Starbucks coffee on the table and sat across from her. You have everything we need, he said, sliding a folder toward her. Copies of your marriage license, property records, prenatal hospital bills, and screenshots of his messages. That text from Lydia, perfect evidence of ongoing contact. Julia nodded slowly. He'll deny it. He can try, Mark replied, but you warned him. That matters. And I'll make sure you keep the house in Greenwich under your name until the court says otherwise. She looked out the window, watching the city come alive. The honking taxis, the smell of bagels drifting from the corner shop. For the first time in months, the world felt real again. But reality also meant fear. She had left behind everything familiar, her wardrobe, her studio clients, her security. Andrew could track her. He had the resources, the lawyers, the power. Mark seemed to read her thoughts. "Julia, listen to me," he said gently. "He can't touch you right now. The law's on your side, and you're not alone." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked them dry. "I used to think being strong meant forgiving him," she whispered. "Now I realize it means leaving." Mark nodded silently. The baby stirred. Julia picked him up, his small fingers curling around hers. "He deserves better than lies," she said. "Then we'll build better," Mark answered. Hours later, sunlight poured through the curtains. Julia changed into jeans and a white cotton shirt, her first ordinary outfit since giving birth. She opened her MacBook Air, typing a quiet email to her clients, taking an extended leave for family reasons. "Thank you for your understanding." When she hit send, it felt like cutting a final string. Her phone lit up again, this time a message from Andrew's mother, Grace. "Julia, I heard what happened. Please tell me you and the baby are safe." Julia hesitated, then replied simply, "We're safe. Please don't tell him where I am." Grace's response came seconds later. "You have my word." Julia exhaled, her chest tightening with a strange mix of grief and relief. Somewhere deep inside she knew Grace had already chosen sides, and it wasn't Andrew's. Outside, sirens wailed faintly, blending with the morning rush. Julia looked down at her son, his eyes fluttering open under the golden light. "We're starting over, little one," she whispered. "This time, no more warnings." The mansion felt unnaturally silent when Andrew pulled into the driveway just after sunrise. His Mercedes S-Class was still damp from the night rain. He yawned, checking his phone. No messages from Julia. Maybe she's asleep with the baby, he thought, but a flicker of unease crawled through his chest. Inside, the air smelled faintly of baby powder and cold coffee. The Tiffany lamp still glowed weakly in the living room, and a half-finished bottle of milk sat beside the couch. Andrew frowned. "Julia?" His voice echoed through the hallways. No answer, only the ticking of the wall clock. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The nursery door stood ajar. The crib was empty. The baby's clothes, gone, her jewelry box missing. The drawers were open but neatly. Not like a robbery, like someone had left intentionally. Andrew's pulse quickened. He rushed to the closet. Her clothes, shoes, handbags, all still there. But the one thing that mattered most, her, wasn't. Then he noticed the folded note on the bed, in Julia's handwriting. "I warned you once. This time, I'm done." No signature, just that single line, calm and devastating. Andrew stumbled backward, clutching his phone. 6 missed calls to her number. Voicemail again and again. He dialed Grace, his mother. "Mom, have you talked to Julia?" There was a pause, heavy and deliberate. "She's safe," Grace said finally. "And before you ask, no, I won't tell you where. You broke her trust, Andrew." "Mom, you promised that girl you'd never see Lydia again. You lied to her, and to me." The line went dead. Andrew's stomach dropped. He slammed the phone down and stormed into his office. His MacBook was open, Julia's login still active. He clicked through her folders, desperate for clues. Instead, he found something he didn't expect. Legal documents. Scanned files labeled prenup, property share, custody rights. All dated 2 weeks ago. His chest tightened. She planned this. He opened one file and froze. A signature, Mark Taylor Esker, Julia's old law school friend. Rage boiled up, sharp and blinding. He'd been so certain Julia would never leave. She was too gentle, too forgiving. He thought the threats she'd made months ago were just words said in pain. But now she'd proved him wrong. Andrew grabbed his keys, heading toward the garage. "She can't just take my son," he muttered. But the moment he said it aloud, it hit him how wrong that sentence sounded. My son, not our. He hesitated at the threshold, suddenly remembering Julia's face the day she nearly miscarried, pale, shaking, terrified. He'd sworn to protect her. And now, 2 weeks after she almost died giving birth, he'd driven her away. A notification pinged on his phone, a message from Lydia. "Did she find out? You okay?" Andrew stared at it, jaw tightening. He typed one word, "Don't text me again," and hit send. But it was already too late. Outside, the sun rose over the manicured lawn, bright and merciless. The mansion that once symbolized power now felt like a hollow shell. For the first time, Andrew understood what silence truly sounded like, the sound of consequences. He sank into the armchair, staring at the note again. "I warned you once." This wasn't a tantrum, it was a verdict. The first full day in Manhattan felt strangely calm. The baby's soft breaths filled the quiet brownstone, mixing with the faint hum of city traffic outside. Julia hadn't slept at all, yet her mind felt razor clear. After years of enduring half-truths and polished lies, clarity was a luxury she could finally afford. Mark returned with a paper bag of groceries, diapers, bottled water, and a small bouquet of lilies. "You didn't eat last night," he said, placing a warm bagel beside her coffee. "You'll need your strength." Court filings start Monday. Julia looked up from the cradle. "So it's real now," she murmured. "It's real," Mark confirmed, "and you're ahead of him. The temporary custody order will land before he can even contest it." She exhaled slowly, her fingers tracing the baby's blanket. "I kept waiting for him to change, Mark. I thought if I just loved him enough." Mark's expression softened. "You can't outlove someone's dishonesty." For a while they sat in silence, sunlight creeping across the wooden floor. Julia's gaze fell on the MacBook Air sitting on the coffee table. She opened it and searched her cloud drive. Emails, receipts, photographs, digital footprints of a woman who once believed in forever. One folder caught her eye. Baby shower, Lydia Carter RSVP. Her stomach clenched. Lydia had been there, smiling, pretending to be a family friend. That was 6 months ago. The betrayal hadn't started recently. It had only been exposed recently. Julia selected the screenshots, forwarded them to Mark's encrypted inbox, and closed the laptop. When the baby began to cry, she lifted him carefully. The incision along her abdomen still ached, reminding her that strength could coexist with fragility. She walked to the window, swaying gently. Outside, Central Park shimmered in early spring light. Runners, nannies, businessmen, everyone moving forward. She decided she would too. By noon, Julia stepped out for the first time since leaving Greenwich. The crisp air hit her lungs like a rebirth. She wore sunglasses and a beige trench coat. The baby slept in a stroller covered by a soft blue blanket. On the corner cafe, she ordered a latte, her first act of normalcy. At the next table, 2 women chatted about the upcoming charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton. Julia smiled faintly. She used to attend those same events beside Andrew, playing the polished wife while gossip swirled about the perfect Miller couple. Now she was invisible and freer than ever. Her phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. "You really think you can hide?" Her heartbeat spiked. The number wasn't saved, but she knew the tone. Lydia. Julia took a steady breath and forwarded the text to Mark. Within minutes, he called back. "I'll handle it. Don't reply." "She's bold," Julia said quietly. "She's desperate," Mark corrected, "and desperate people make mistakes." Julia returned to the apartment just before sunset. She locked the door, fed the baby, and watched him drift into sleep. On the table lay the lilies Mark had brought. Their scent filled the room, clean, fresh, alive. She sat beside the bassinet and whispered, "We're going to build something better, little one. No more mansions built on lies." For the first time she smiled, not with joy, but with certainty. The fear that had once controlled her was gone, replaced by something stronger, resolve. Outside, Manhattan glowed with millions of windows, each one a story of survival. And somewhere across the river, Andrew was finally realizing what it meant to lose the one thing he thought he owned. Julia leaned back, closed her eyes, and let the city cradle her in its restless heartbeat. Andrew Miller wasn't used to being ignored. For 48 hours, Julia hadn't answered a single call. The Greenwich mansion, once full of order and staff, now echoed with restless footsteps and the hum of unanswered questions. He sat at his oak desk, scrolling through the latest emails from his assistant. None of them mattered, except the one with the subject line, "Notice of temporary custody and property hold." Andrew froze. Attached was a scanned copy stamped by the Manhattan family court, dated the morning after Julia disappeared. His heart pounded. "She filed already," he muttered. "She planned this." He pushed the papers away, grabbed his phone, and called a contact. Thomas Reed, a private investigator he'd used for business competitors. "Find her. I don't care what it takes." Thomas's voice was steady. "I'll start with her digital trail. But be careful, Andrew. If she's got a lawyer, any aggressive move could backfire." Andrew hung up without answering. Consequences had never frightened him, losing control did. That evening, Lydia called. "You sound stressed," she purred. "Don't," Andrew cut her off. "You started this." "Me?" Her tone turned sharp. "I didn't tell you to leave your phone lying around, Andrew. You texted me after she left. I was worried about you." He laughed bitterly. You were worried about losing your free dinners and luxury bags. Don't contact me again. He ended the call and hurled the phone across the room. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Julia sat at the dining table, reviewing paperwork under the dim glow of the kitchen lamp. The baby slept nearby, wrapped in a soft white blanket. Mark arrived with updates. Andrew's legal team reached out, he said. They're panicking. That means the papers landed. Julia nodded. Good, I want everything done quietly, no public drama. Mark smiled faintly. You might not get that luxury. The tabloids just posted about Andrew being spotted at a hotel with a mystery woman. Lydia, obviously. It's gaining traction. Julia blinked. Already? People love watching rich men crumble, Mark said dryly. And it helps your custody case. Public image matters. Julia closed her eyes for a moment. I don't want revenge, Mark. I just want peace. I know, he replied, but sometimes peace comes after the storm. She opened her MacBook Air, checking her inbox. Dozens of unread emails from clients, old friends, and one unexpected name, Grace Miller. I told him not to look for you. He's unraveling. Take care of yourself, Julia. I'll testify if you need me. Julia's chest tightened. Grace had once been cold, distant, but truth had a way of reshaping people. She typed back, thank you. Please stay safe. As the night deepened, Julia rocked her baby to sleep. The city outside buzzed with taxis and rain. She whispered, one day, you'll know why we left. I just hope you never inherit his pride. In Greenwich, Andrew stared at the empty crib. For the first time, he noticed the small embroidered name stitched into the baby blanket Julia had left behind. Elias. Their son's name. He hadn't even been there when it was chosen. He sank to the floor, head in his hands. The mansion, once a trophy of success, now felt like a punishment. Every tick of the clock sounded like judgment. He had met Lydia again for comfort. Instead, he'd lost everything that mattered. And somewhere, beneath his denial, he knew Julia wasn't coming back. By the fourth morning, Andrew's name was all over the internet. Real estate moguls spotted leaving Ritz-Carlton with unknown woman. The photo was grainy, but Lydia's silhouette was unmistakable. He scrolled through the comments, each one cutting deeper than the last. His wife just gave birth. Disgusting. Money can't buy loyalty. Andrew slammed his laptop shut. His PR manager, Claire Donovan, stood by the window, her expression unreadable. We can spin this, but only if you cooperate, she said. I didn't do anything wrong, he snapped. Claire raised an eyebrow. Then where's your wife? The question hung in the air. Andrew looked away. She left. She'll come back once she cools off. Andrew, Claire said slowly. She filed for custody, froze joint accounts, and hired one of the best family lawyers in the state. She's not cooling off. She's done. Her tone was clinical, not cruel, but it cut sharper than any insult. In Manhattan, Julia spent the same morning at Mark's office. The baby slept peacefully in a bassinet beside her while stacks of papers covered the desk. The court granted temporary custody, Mark said, handing her the document. It's official. Andrew can't remove the child from your care without a court order. Julia exhaled, her shoulders finally dropping. I thought I'd feel relieved, she whispered, but I just feel empty. That's normal, Mark replied. When someone breaks you for years, freedom doesn't feel like joy, it feels like silence. Julia smiled faintly, her eyes glassy. Silence is still better than pretending. Mark hesitated. You know, Grace called my office this morning. She wants to help your case. She said she has emails from Andrew's company showing how he used marital funds to buy gifts for Lydia. Julia looked down. She's really doing this? She said she should have believed you sooner. Julia wiped a tear before it could fall. She's a mother too. Maybe now she understands. Back in Greenwich, Andrew's mother confronted him that evening. Grace entered the mansion unannounced, her pearl earrings glinting under the chandelier. Where is she? He demanded, rising from the couch. You mean your wife? The one you humiliated? Grace's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with fury. I raised you better than this, Andrew scoffed. You don't know what she's like. Oh, I know exactly what she's like, Grace shot back. She's the one who stayed when your company nearly went bankrupt. She's the one who held your hand through every scandal. You just couldn't stand that her love came with boundaries. Andrew's throat tightened. She'll ruin me. Grace shook her head. No, Andrew, you did that yourself. That night, Julia stood by the window of the brownstone, the city glowing beneath her. She rocked Elias gently, humming a lullaby she barely remembered from childhood. Her phone pinged, an email from Grace. He's losing control. I'll testify when the hearing begins. Take care of my grandson. Julia typed back, thank you. Maybe one day he'll understand what love was supposed to mean. Outside, thunder rumbled across the skyline. Julia kissed her baby's forehead. Let him destroy himself. Sweetheart, she whispered. We're not his to save anymore. In Greenwich, Andrew poured himself a drink he couldn't finish. The mansion lights flickered against the rain. On the desk lay Julia's note, worn from being unfolded too many times. If you ever meet her again. He finally understood that she hadn't been threatening him. She'd been warning him to save himself before it was too late, and he ignored it. By the 6th morning, Greenwich was crawling with reporters. 2 black SUVs and a camera van idled near the gate, lenses aimed at the mansion. Andrew's assistant begged him not to step outside, but Andrew Miller had never hidden from anyone. He threw on a blazer, opened the door, and instantly drowned in flashing lights. Mr. Miller, where is your wife? Did you cheat while she was pregnant? Is Lydia Carter the woman in the hotel photo? He pushed through the noise, jaw tight. The moment he reached his car, his phone buzzed. Claire Donovan again. Andrew, stop talking to the press, she hissed through the speaker. Our investors are pulling out, one headline away from a stock crash. He started the engine. It'll blow over. Not when your wife's lawyer just filed spousal misconduct claims, she said sharply. And if Lydia sold those hotel photos, it's not blowing over, it's exploding. Andrew froze. What do you mean sold? She's been shopping them to tabloids, for money. The steering wheel slipped in his hands. You're lying. I wish I were. Meanwhile in Manhattan, Julia was meeting Grace in a quiet cafe near Columbus Circle. Grace looked smaller than Julia remembered, her usual confidence replaced by guilt. I kept making excuses for him, Grace said softly, stirring her untouched tea. I told myself he was just stressed, that men like him always come around, but I saw the hotel invoices. Julia nodded slowly. You don't need to explain. You already did enough by telling the truth. I'm testifying because you deserve peace, Grace said, and because my grandson deserves better than his father's shadow. Julia reached across the table, gently touching her hand. Thank you, Grace. I mean it. At that same hour, Andrew's lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, was pacing inside the marble foyer of the mansion. You need to settle, he said firmly. The press has the receipts, the financial auditors found unauthorized transfers, and now Grace is cooperating with opposing counsel. Andrew's pulse thundered. My own mother? She's doing what's right, Pierce said. You should too. Andrew turned away, gripping the window frame. I loved Julia, Pierce sighed. Maybe, but love isn't evidence. That evening, Lydia Carter's name hit every news feed. Insider source leaks photo scandal, names Andrew Miller. Julia didn't even open the article. Mark had warned her to stay offline, focus on the custody hearing. Still, the headline's reflection danced across her MacBook screen as she rocked Elias to sleep. Mark called to confirm what she already knew. His company's frozen trading, and the state's investigating tax discrepancies tied to his firm. He's done. Julia looked down at her baby, whose tiny hand clutched her finger. Then maybe now he'll finally stop trying to own people. You'll need to testify next week, Mark added. After that, you'll have full custody and property rights. Julia smiled faintly. I don't care about the property, just the peace. Back in Greenwich, Andrew sat in the dim light of his office. His reflection in the window looked older, defeated. A message appeared on his phone. Lydia, I didn't mean for this to happen. He stared at it, then deleted it. For once, he didn't reply. The mansion, once filled with noise and ambition, now sounded like the aftermath of an explosion. He looked at the framed family photo on his desk, Julia 8 months pregnant, smiling in a white dress, his hand on her belly, the illusion of love. He touched the glass and whispered, You warned me, and I still didn't listen. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping against the windows like quiet applause for his downfall. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and anxiety. Julia sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed simply in a cream blouse and navy skirt. Beside her, Mark organized files with quiet precision. Across the aisle, Andrew adjusted his cufflinks, avoiding her gaze. The once impeccable businessman now looked hollow, dark circles, trembling hands, a man unaccustomed to losing control. At the back of the room, Grace sat alone. She gave Julia a small, reassuring nod. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of the gavel silenced the whispers. Case of Anderson versus Miller, custody and property division, the clerk announced. Julia's heartbeat slowed. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head for days, not to win, just to end. Mark began, his voice calm but cutting. Your Honor, my client endured repeated deception during a high-risk pregnancy. Evidence shows Mr. Miller violated their reconciliation agreement by meeting with Miss Misspoke, Lydia Carter, multiple times, including the week of delivery. He projected images onto the screen, time-stamped hotel logs, text messages, financial records. The room stirred. Andrew's lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, stood. Objection? Hearsay. Sustained, the judge replied, though his expression hinted he'd seen enough already. Mark handed over a folder. These are authenticated by Mr. Miller's own assistant. And Your Honor, note that my client filed for custody before public exposure, proving her intent was protection, not retaliation. Julia stared at her hands, remembering the night she packed the duffel bag, the soft cry of Elias, the cold air on her skin, the final lock turning behind her. Then the door at the back opened. Lydia entered, summoned by subpoena. Her polished mask was gone. She looked nervous, fragile, almost sorry. Mark called her to the stand. Miss Carter, please state your relationship with Mr. Miller. She hesitated. We worked together. And we had an affair. Murmurs filled the room. Andrew's shoulders stiffened. Mark continued. Were you aware his wife had just given birth? Yes. And yet you met him at the Ritz-Carlton the same day? Tears welled in Lydia's eyes. He said they were separated. I didn't know. Julia lifted her head for the first time. Their eyes met, not with hatred, but pity. Lydia looked away, trembling. Grace's quiet sob broke the silence. The judge finally spoke. That's enough. We'll recess before closing arguments. As people began to stand, Andrew turned toward Julia. Please, he whispered, don't take him from me. Julia's voice was steady. You took yourself from him the moment you lied. Mark gently guided her away before Andrew could reply. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun burned through thin clouds. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but Julia kept walking. Grace caught up, clutching her hand. He looked broken, Grace murmured. He built his world on cracks, Julia replied. It was bound to collapse. Grace nodded, tears streaming freely now. You did the right thing, dear. Julia smiled faintly. I just kept my promise. They stood together on the courthouse steps as photographers clicked. Julia shielded the stroller from the flashes. Elias stirred but didn't cry. He's strong, Grace said softly. He had to be, Julia answered. Inside the courtroom, Andrew sat alone at the defense table, staring at the judge's bench. The echo of Lydia's testimony rang in his ears. For the first time he didn't feel anger, only loss. On the table lay the last family photo he'd ever have. He turned it face down, unable to look. Outside, Julia crossed the street, sunlight glinting off the stroller's handle. Each step carried her further from the past and closer to something new. The verdict came on a Tuesday morning, the air outside the courthouse cold and crisp. Julia stood by the tall windows watching sunlight reflect off the marble floors. Elias slept quietly in the stroller beside her, unaware of how much his future depended on this day. When the bailiff called the room to order, Julia felt the familiar tightening in her chest, but not fear this time. It was finality. Mark sat beside her, hands folded neatly atop a stack of documents. Across the aisle, Andrew looked smaller somehow, his navy suit hanging loose around his shoulders. Grace sat a few rows behind him, her expression unreadable. The judge cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Julia Anderson Miller, for full physical and legal custody of the minor child, Elias Miller. The defendant's visitation will be limited, subject to court supervision. Andrew closed his eyes, his jaw trembling. The words seemed to echo across the room. The judge continued. Furthermore, due to misuse of marital assets and extramarital misconduct, the Greenwich property and 60% of shared holdings are hereby transferred to the plaintiff. Case closed. The gavel fell with a single sharp strike. Julia exhaled, the sound soft but steady. Mark whispered, "It's over." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening, not with triumph but with quiet exhaustion. Across the room, Andrew stared at the empty space where Julia once sat beside him during his company award dinners, his charity galas, his flawless public life. All of it gone. Grace rose and walked past her son without speaking. She stopped beside Julia instead. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Julia smiled faintly. "So did you." They left the courthouse together while Andrew remained seated, motionless. Outside, the city buzzed like it didn't care about broken promises or verdicts. Julia stepped onto the sidewalk, the breeze catching the hem of her coat. Grace placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He'll have to face what he built," she murmured. "I know," Julia said, "but that's not my battle anymore." They walked to the nearby cafe, the same one where they had met a week earlier. Julia ordered black coffee. Grace asked for chamomile tea. For the first time in months, they didn't talk about lawyers, scandals, or courtrooms. They talked about the baby's sleeping schedule, the best formula brand, the coming spring. It felt like life again. When Grace left to catch her car, Julia sat by the window watching people pass. She opened her MacBook Air, logged into her design portfolio, and stared at the blank screen. Slowly, her fingers began to move, sketching, drafting, imagining. Not the mansion, not the nursery, but a small, sunlit home surrounded by trees. Something new. A soft cry interrupted her. She smiled, closing the laptop and lifting Elias into her arms. "You hungry again?" she teased gently. His tiny hand clutched her finger as if answering. That evening, news reports confirmed that Andrew's company had been suspended pending investigation for tax violations. Lydia had fled the state. His lawyer resigned. Inside the mansion, Andrew wandered through the echoing halls. The nursery door was still open, the crib empty. He stood there for a long time, then closed the door, quietly, almost respectfully. He had learned the difference between ownership and love too late. Julia placed Elias in his bassinet by the window of the Manhattan brownstone. The lights of Central Park shimmered beyond the glass. She whispered, "You'll grow up knowing the truth, but not the hate." Outside, the city hummed, a lullaby of freedom. 3 months later, the snow along Central Park had begun to melt, revealing patches of green grass and the first hints of spring. Julia leaned against the balcony railing of her new apartment, holding a mug of coffee while Elias cooed softly in his baby chair. He was 4 months old now, chubbier, brighter, and endlessly curious about everything. The world outside no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt alive. She had returned to work part-time, designing small living spaces for single mothers. Her latest project, a reading nook for a client in Brooklyn, reminded her how healing could begin from the simplest things: warm light, clean walls, peace. On her MacBook Air, sketches and invoices filled the screen. For once, the chaos was productive, not painful. A soft knock interrupted her. Grace stood at the door, holding a bag of groceries and her signature gentle smile. "I brought lunch," she said. Julia laughed. "You know you don't have to keep feeding us." "I do," Grace replied. "It keeps me from thinking about how badly I raised my son." Julia's expression softened. "You raised a man who's finally learning consequences. That's not failure." They sat together, eating salad and soup, the baby babbling between them. Grace showed Julia photos of her garden back in Connecticut. New tulips, fresh soil, a patch where she planned to plant hydrangeas in Elias's name. "He's growing fast," Grace said, watching the baby reach for her bracelet. Julia nodded, smiling. "He'll crawl soon. I'll need to baby-proof the whole place." "You've done well, Julia," Grace said quietly. "You could have turned bitter, but you didn't." Julia looked out the window, watching sunlight spill across the city. "Bitterness would still tie me to him. I'd rather let go." Grace reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You already have." Later that afternoon, Julia took Elias for a walk through Central Park. The air was cool and clean, full of laughter from children and the rhythmic bark of dogs chasing frisbees. She stopped near the fountain, sat on a bench and fed Elias while the wind brushed through her hair. For a moment, she thought of Andrew, not with hate, but with a strange, quiet understanding. He had been raised to believe love was possession. She had been raised to believe love was endurance. Both were wrong, she realized. Love, when true, was freedom. Her phone buzzed, a news headline. Former CEO Andrew Miller sentenced to probation for tax fraud, firm liquidated. She read it once, sighed, and locked the screen. There was no satisfaction left in punishment, only peace and distance. A woman beside her smiled at the baby. "He's beautiful," she said. "You look like you've been through a lot, but you're glowing." Julia laughed softly. "We made it through." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Manhattan skyline, Julia tucked Elias into his crib. She sat beside the window, reading Women Who Run with the Wolves on her Kindle, under the warm glow of the lamp. The apartment was quiet, except for the city's heartbeat far below. She whispered, almost to herself, "I kept my word. I left when he met her again. But what I found after leaving was me." Elias stirred, then fell back asleep. Julia smiled, closing the book. Outside, the skyline shimmered, proof that light always finds a way through cracks, no matter how deep. 6 months later, summer sunlight poured through Julia's apartment, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. Elias, now 7 months old, sat surrounded by plush toys, his laughter echoing through the room like music. Julia placed a vase of fresh lilies on the counter, the same kind Mark had brought her the night she escaped. They no longer reminded her of fear. They reminded her of survival. Her design business had grown quietly, built on word of mouth and sincerity. Her latest client called her the woman who turns broken spaces into homes. That title felt truer than anything else she'd ever owned. Grace visited often, bringing stories, cookies, and light. Sometimes they'd walk in Central Park together, pushing the stroller along the same path Julia had taken the morning after she left Greenwich. The path where she'd first realized she could start again. Andrew's name still surfaced occasionally in business news, but it no longer stirred her heart. He had become part of another life, a story closed with mercy, not malice. That evening, Julia lifted Elias into her arms, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "We're home now." Outside, Manhattan glowed under the fading sun. The city was loud, alive, imperfect, exactly like life itself. And for the first time, Julia didn't want perfection anymore. She had peace.
The flight landed 2 hours early. Naomi smiled to herself as she turned off airplane mode on her phone, imagining Trevor's face when she walked through the door with his favorite takeout and the expensive watch she'd bought for their 5th anniversary. The Seattle conference had been productive, but she'd missed him. 3 weeks apart was too long. She'd kept the early return a secret, wanting to surprise him. Their anniversary was tomorrow, but why wait? Tonight they could start celebrating. She'd even cleared her schedule for the entire weekend, something she rarely did. The taxi pulled up to their modest 2-story home in the suburbs. Everything looked normal. Trevor's car was in the driveway, which made sense since it was Saturday afternoon. She paid the driver, grabbed her luggage and the shopping bags, and headed to the front door. The house was quiet when she stepped inside. "Trevor?" she called out, setting down her bags in the entryway. No response. Maybe he was taking a nap or listening to music with headphones. She climbed the stairs, her heart light with anticipation. The bedroom door was slightly open. She pushed it wider, stepping into the room with a smile ready on her lips. That smile died instantly. Trevor was in their bed. But he wasn't alone. A woman with long auburn hair was beside him, wrapped in sheets that Naomi had picked out just 3 months ago. They weren't even trying to hide. They were just lying there, talking and laughing, completely comfortable. The woman saw her first. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't scream or scramble to cover herself. Instead, she looked almost annoyed at the interruption. Trevor turned his head. When he saw Naomi standing in the doorway, frozen in shock, he didn't look guilty. He didn't look ashamed. He just looked irritated. "You're home early," he said flatly, sitting up. The woman pulled the sheet higher, watching with cool detachment. Naomi's bags slipped from her hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. This was her husband. This was their bedroom. This was their anniversary weekend. "Trevor?" she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" He swung his legs over the side of the bed, standing up and reaching for his pants without any sense of urgency. "This is Simone. My boss. I've mentioned her. Simone. The demanding boss who required late nights and weekend work. The boss whose calls Trevor always took even during dinner. The boss he'd been complaining about for months while secretly praising her to others. Your boss." Naomi repeated, her voice hollow. "Trevor, why is your boss in our bed?" He pulled on his shirt, not meeting her eyes. "Because I'm in a relationship with her. I've been meaning to talk to you about this, actually. The timing is just terrible." "Terrible timing?" Naomi's voice rose, shock giving way to a surge of pain and anger. "You're cheating on me in our home, in our bed, and you're worried about timing?" "I'm not cheating," Trevor said, his tone defensive. "Cheating implies I'm trying to hide something. I'm being honest now. Simone and I are together." We've been together for 3 months. 3 months. While Naomi had been traveling for work, building her career, believing she had a loving husband waiting at home. 3 months of lies. Simone finally spoke, her voice smooth and cold. Trevor, maybe we should have this conversation when she's calmer. Don't talk about me like I'm not here, Naomi snapped, her eyes flashing. She looked at the woman who'd destroyed her marriage. Simone was beautiful, polished, dressed now in an expensive blouse and slacks. She looked like someone used to getting what she wanted. Naomi, look, Trevor said, his voice taking on a condescending tone that made her stomach turn. You're never here anyway. You're always gone on your business trips, always busy with work. Simone understands my needs. She makes time for me. I travel for work to support us. Naomi shot back. You said you understood. You said you were proud of my career. I lied. The words hit her like a slap. Trevor shrugged, showing no remorse. I was proud at first, but then I met Simone. She's successful, powerful, and she actually wants to spend time with me. She values me. I valued you. I loved you. Naomi's voice cracked. She hated that she was showing weakness in front of them, but 5 years of marriage, of trust, of building a life together was crumbling in minutes. Past tense. Exactly. Trevor walked to the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. I'm leaving, Naomi. I'm moving in with Simone. She has a penthouse downtown, a real home for successful people. Not this suburban starter house you insisted on keeping. This house that Naomi had bought with her own money, though Trevor didn't know that. This house she'd chosen because it felt like a home, not a showpiece. You're leaving? Just like that? On our anniversary weekend? Naomi felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. See, this is what I mean, Trevor said, zipping up the bag. You remember the anniversary, but where have you been for the last year? At conferences. At meetings. At dinners with colleagues. Simone is present. She's there when I need her. Simone stood up, dressed now, collecting her things with the confidence of someone who'd already won. Trevor, darling, we should go. This is clearly getting too emotional. Darling? Naomi repeated, the word tasting like poison. You're calling him darling in front of his wife? Ex-wife, actually, Trevor corrected, pulling his wedding ring off and tossing it at Naomi's feet. It bounced once and rolled under the dresser. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. You can keep the house. I don't need it anymore. He walked past her, Simone following close behind. Naomi stood paralyzed, unable to move or speak. She heard them go down the stairs, heard the front door open and close. Heard Trevor's car start and drive away. Only then did she move, her legs giving out as she sank to the floor. The bedroom suddenly felt enormous and empty. The sheets were still rumpled from their betrayal. The air still carried Simone's expensive perfume. Naomi wrapped her arms around herself, her body shaking. But she didn't cry. Not yet. She was too shocked, too numb. She looked at the spot where Trevor's wedding ring had disappeared. 5 years, reduced to a piece of metal under the furniture. 5 years of her life, discarded like it meant nothing. But as she sat there in the wreckage of her marriage, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something that would grow louder in the hours to come. Trevor had no idea who he'd just left. None at all. Naomi sat on the bedroom floor for over an hour before she finally moved. The sun had shifted, casting different shadows across the room. She stood up slowly, her legs stiff, and walked to the window. Trevor's car was gone. He was really gone. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and dialed a number she had on speed dial. Jordan speaking, came the crisp, professional voice of her executive assistant. It's me, Naomi said quietly. I need you to clear my schedule for the next 3 days. All meetings, all calls. Everything. There was a pause. Jordan had worked for her for 7 years and could read her moods instantly. What happened? Trevor found out I'm not who he thinks I am. Naomi laughed bitterly. Actually, no. He still doesn't know. He just left me for someone he thinks is more successful than me. I'm coming over, Jordan said immediately. No. Naomi took a deep breath, straightening her spine. Not yet. I need a few hours to process. But tomorrow, I need you to pull every file we have on TechVision Industries. Every single document. TechVision? That's one of our subsidiary companies. Why? Jordan stopped. Wait, doesn't Trevor work there? He does. And so does his new girlfriend. The woman he just left me for. Naomi walked to her closet and opened the hidden door in the back, revealing the private office she'd built when they moved in. Trevor had never questioned why one closet was slightly smaller than it should be. Inside was her real life. The life Trevor knew nothing about. On the walls were framed magazine covers featuring her face. Forbes, Fortune Business Weekly. Naomi Bennett, the self-made billionaire revolutionizing global trade. At 32, Bennett Global Solutions CEO is changing the game. How Naomi Bennett built an empire from nothing. Her laptop sat on the desk, password protected with financial reports showing the current value of Bennett Global Solutions, $8.7 billion. Trevor thought she was Grace Collins, a mid-level manager at a consulting firm who traveled frequently for client meetings. He'd never questioned why she was vague about her job. He'd never asked to meet her colleagues. He'd been content to let her pay most of the bills from what he assumed was a decent salary, while he worked his way up at what he thought was an impressive tech company. The truth was so much bigger than he'd ever imagined. Naomi Bennett had started her first business at 22, right after college. A simple import-export company that connected American manufacturers with overseas suppliers. She'd worked 18-hour days, slept in her car when she couldn't afford rent, and built her empire dollar by dollar. By 25, she'd expanded into technology logistics. By 28, she'd gone global. By 30, she was a billionaire. By 32, Bennett Global Solutions owned 17 subsidiary companies across 6 continents, including TechVision Industries. She'd met Trevor 6 years ago at a coffee shop, before her biggest expansion. He'd been charming, funny, and kind. For the first time in her adult life, someone was interested in her as a person, not as a business opportunity or a networking contact. She'd been tired of being Naomi Bennett, CEO. She'd wanted to be just Naomi. Just a woman. So she'd introduced herself as Grace Collins, told him she worked in consulting, and let him believe she was ordinary. When they'd gotten serious, she'd planned to tell him the truth. But then she'd started noticing things. The way Trevor's eyes lit up when he talked about wealthy clients at his company. The way he compared himself to his more successful co-workers. The casual comments about wanting a bigger house, a luxury car, a lifestyle that matched his ambitions. She'd decided to wait. To see if he really loved her, not the image of success she could provide. Now she had her answer. Trevor had left Grace Collins for someone he thought was powerful and wealthy. He'd left the woman he thought was beneath him for a woman he believed was his equal. The irony was devastating. Simone worked as a regional director at TechVision Industries, making roughly $300,000 a year. A good salary certainly. But Naomi could buy and sell her entire life 100 times over without noticing the dent in her bank account. Naomi pulled out her tablet and logged into the private Bennett Global Network. She accessed the TechVision employee database. There was Trevor's file. Mid-level manager, sales division, salary of $90,000 a year. Performance reviews were average. He was coasting. She switched to Simone's file. Regional director hired 2 years ago. Good performance initially, but recent reports showed concerning patterns. Extended expense accounts. Frequent client dinners with no documented clients. Multiple reports of favoritism toward certain employees. Naomi made a note to have her security team investigate Simone's activities. If she was embezzling or committing fraud, that would be valuable information. Her phone buzzed. A text from Trevor, "Please don't make this difficult. Sign the divorce papers when they arrive. You'll be fine." She stared at the message. Part of her wanted to text back the truth right now. To tell him exactly who she was and watch his world implode. But that would be too easy. Too quick. No. Trevor wanted to believe he'd traded up. He wanted to think he'd left a boring, absent wife for a powerful, present partner. Let him believe it. Let him enjoy his victory for a while. Because when the truth came out, and it would come out, his fall would be so much harder. Naomi Bennett didn't get to where she was by acting on emotion. She got there by being strategic, patient, and ruthless when necessary. Trevor had hurt her deeply. He'd betrayed her trust, mocked her love, and thrown away their marriage without a second thought. But more than that, he'd shown her who he really was. A man who valued status over substance. Who chose perceived power over genuine connection. She wouldn't cry over him. Not anymore. She would plan. Naomi typed a response to Trevor, "I understand. I hope you'll be happy." Short. Dignified. Giving him exactly what he wanted. An easy exit. She put her phone down and pulled out a legal pad. At the top, she wrote, "Operation Revelation." Then she started making a list. She had resources Trevor couldn't imagine. Information he didn't know existed. Power he'd never understand. By the time she was done planning, Trevor would realize exactly what he'd lost. And it would destroy him. Not with her hands. Not with revenge in the traditional sense. just with the truth. Sometimes the truth was the most devastating weapon of all. Monday morning arrived with crystal clear skies. Naomi stood in her private office at Bennett Global headquarters on the 45th floor, looking out over the city skyline. From this height, the problems of ordinary people seemed small. But she remembered being ordinary once before the money and success. She remembered struggling and fighting for every opportunity. That's why Trevor's betrayal cut so deep. He hadn't fallen in love with someone else. He'd fallen in love with what he thought was a better life. Jordan knocked and entered, carrying a thick folder and 2 coffee cups. "Triple espresso, no sugar, just like you need on days like this," she said, handing one to Naomi. "You read my mind." Naomi took the cup gratefully. She hadn't slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Trevor and Simone in her bed. "I pulled everything on Tech Vision Industries like you asked." Jordan set the folder on Naomi's desk. "And I did some extra digging. You're going to want to see this." Naomi opened the folder. Inside were expense reports, email logs, and security footage stills from Tech Vision's offices. "What am I looking at?" "Simone has been living way above her salary." Jordan pointed to the expense reports. "She's been billing personal shopping trips as client entertainment. That dress she wore to the company holiday party? $8,000, charged to the business account under professional development. She's done this at least 15 times in the last 6 months." Naomi flipped through the pages. Jewelry, spa treatments, luxury hotel stays, all disguised as business expenses. "This is fraud." "It gets better," Jordan said, pulling out another stack of papers. "She's been submitting invoices for vendor services that don't exist. I cross-referenced the vendor names with state business registrations. 3 of them are shell companies registered to P.O. boxes. The payments go to an offshore account." "How much has she stolen?" "Roughly $400,000 over the past year." Naomi leaned back in her chair, processing this information. Simone wasn't just Trevor's boss. She was a criminal. And Trevor had no idea he'd left his wife for a woman who was embezzling from the company. "What about Trevor?" Naomi asked quietly. "Has he been involved in any of this?" Jordan hesitated, which told Naomi everything she needed to know. "He's been helpful to her in ways that violate his employment contract. He shared confidential sales data with her that he shouldn't have had access to. He used his credentials to retrieve files from secure servers and forward them to her personal email." "Why would he do that?" "Based on the timestamps and email contents, it looks like he was trying to impress her. He wanted to prove he could be useful to someone in power." Jordan's expression softened with sympathy. He was manipulating data to make her division look better in corporate reports. Naomi felt a fresh wave of pain. Trevor hadn't just betrayed her personally. He'd betrayed professional ethics, company policy, and his own integrity, all to impress a woman who was using him. "Does Simone know the data was falsified?" Naomi asked. "Hard to say for certain, but given her level of experience, she should have questioned some of the numbers. Either she knew and didn't care, or she was willfully blind to it." Naomi stood and walked to the window again. Somewhere out there, Trevor was probably at his desk at Tech Vision, thinking he'd made the smartest decision of his life. He traded a supposedly ordinary wife for a powerful executive. He thought he'd moved up in the world. "What do you want to do?" Jordan asked gently. "We could report this immediately. Both of them would be terminated and possibly face criminal charges." "No." Naomi turned around, her expression calm but determined. "Not yet. If we move now, Trevor will think this is about the affair. He'll paint me as a vindictive ex-wife who couldn't handle being left. The truth will get lost in the drama." "So what's the plan?" "Schedule a routine corporate audit of Tech Vision Industries for next month. Make it part of our standard quarterly review process. Nothing unusual. Tech Vision gets audited regularly anyway." Jordan nodded, understanding immediately. "The audit will uncover Simone's fraud naturally. No one can claim bias or revenge." "Exactly. And Trevor's contract violations will come out as part of the investigation. It won't be personal. It will be business." Naomi sat back down at her desk. "In the meantime, I want full surveillance on both of them. Legal surveillance only, nothing invasive. Track their social media, their public activities, any information they share openly. You want to see how far they'll go. I want to document everything. When this ends, I want a complete record of how they behaved during this time. Let them think they got away with it. Let them celebrate their victory." Jordan made notes on her tablet. "What about the divorce?" "Trevor said he'd send papers. Let his lawyer contact mine. I'll sign whatever he wants. He thinks I'm Grace Collins with minimal assets. My legal team will keep it that way. He'll get what he expects from an ordinary divorce. Nothing. He's going to be shocked when he finds out the truth. He's going to be destroyed, Naomi corrected quietly. But that's not my goal. My goal is justice. What happens to Trevor after the truth comes out is his own fault. Jordan studied her boss with concern. Are you okay? Really okay? This is your marriage we're talking about, not just a business problem. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. I'm hurt, she admitted finally. I loved him. I trusted him. I thought we built something real together. But I'm also angry. Not just because he cheated, but because of why he cheated. He didn't fall in love with Simone as a person. He fell in love with what he thought she represented. Power. Status. Success. He's an idiot. A small smile crossed Naomi's face. Yes, he is. But he's an idiot who made his choice. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Jordan stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, you deserve so much better than him. You always did. I know, Naomi said. And she meant it. After Jordan left, Naomi opened her personal laptop and looked at Trevor's social media for the first time since Saturday. His profile picture had changed. It was now a photo of him and Simone at an expensive restaurant, both dressed up, both smiling like they'd won the lottery. The caption read, "New chapter, new life, no regrets." Naomi stared at those 3 words. No regrets. After 5 years of marriage, he had no regrets about leaving her. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing how much that hurt. Instead, she opened a new document and began writing down every detail she could remember about their marriage. The good times and the bad. The moments when she'd noticed his obsession with status. The conversations where he'd dismissed her thoughts. The times he'd made her feel small. She'd been so busy trying to be loved for who she was that she'd missed all the signs of who he really was. Never again. Naomi Bennett had built an empire by being smarter, working harder, and planning better than everyone else. Trevor and Simone had no idea what was coming for them. And when it arrived, it would be perfectly legal, completely justified, and absolutely devastating. Trevor couldn't believe how good life had become. 2 weeks after leaving Naomi, he was living in Simone's penthouse apartment downtown, waking up to city views and coffee made by someone who actually appreciated him. "Good morning, handsome," Simone said, walking into the bedroom wearing a silk robe. She handed him a cup of coffee. "I have news. You're being promoted." Trevor sat up quickly. "What? Really? Really? I recommended you for senior sales manager. The approval came through this morning. $20,000 raise, better benefits, and you'll be working directly under me on the executive floor." Trevor felt a rush of validation. This was what he'd been waiting for. Recognition. Respect. Success. "That's incredible. Thank you." Simone kissed him. "You earned it. You've been invaluable to me these past few months. The data you've provided has made my division look outstanding. I'm just glad I could help." Trevor had spent countless evenings pulling reports and analytics for Simone, using his system access to get information she claimed she needed for strategy meetings. It felt good to be useful to someone who mattered. Not like with Naomi, who barely even told him what she did all day. "We should celebrate," Simone said. "I'm thinking dinner at Augustino's, then maybe dancing?" "Perfect." Trevor grabbed his phone to post about his promotion on social media. His feed had been blowing up since he'd updated his relationship status. Friends and former colleagues were commenting, some supportive, some clearly confused about how quickly he'd moved on. He didn't care what they thought. They didn't understand. He'd wasted 5 years with a woman who took him for granted. Now he was with someone who saw his potential. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Trevor, please call me. We need to talk about Naomi." He deleted it without responding. His family loved Naomi, which was part of the problem. They thought she was perfect just because she was polite and brought nice wine to holiday dinners. They didn't see how absent she was, how little effort she put into their marriage. "Everything okay?" Simone asked, noticing his expression. "Just my mother trying to guilt-trip me. She doesn't understand our situation. Family never does." Simone sat beside him on the bed. "They always want you to stay in comfortable situations, even when those situations make you miserable. But you and we understand that life is about taking what we deserve." Trevor nodded. This was exactly right. He deserved success. He deserved a partner who was present and engaged. He deserved a better life than the one Naomi could provide. At work that day, his new title brought immediate changes. He moved to a larger office with a window. His name was added to high-level email chains. People who'd barely noticed him before were suddenly friendly and respectful. During a department meeting, Simone publicly praised his contributions. "Trevor has been instrumental in our recent success," she told the room. "His insights and analysis have helped us exceed our quarterly targets by 15%. Trevor felt pride swell in his chest. This was what recognition felt like. This was what it meant to be valued. After the meeting, several colleagues congratulated him. One of them, a guy named Brian who'd been with the company for 10 years, pulled him aside. "Hey, congrats on the promotion," Brian said. "Can I give you some friendly advice though?" "Sure," Trevor said, though he didn't really want advice right now. "Be careful with the data reports you've been pulling. I know Simone asks for a lot of information, but some of those files are above your clearance level. If internal audit catches on, it could be a problem." Trevor waved off his concern. Simone approved all of it. "I'm helping her with strategic planning." Brian looked uncomfortable. "Just be careful, man. Sometimes executives will ask for things that put the lower-level employee at risk if anything goes wrong. Protect yourself." "I appreciate the concern, but I know what I'm doing." Trevor walked away annoyed. Brian was clearly jealous of his success and his relationship with Simone. That evening, he and Simone went to dinner as planned. The restaurant was expensive, the kind of place Trevor had always wanted to go but could never afford. Simone ordered wine that cost more than his old weekly grocery budget. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To us," Trevor replied, clinking his glass against hers. Across town, in the house she'd once shared with Trevor, Naomi sat at her kitchen table reading the report her investigative team had compiled. Photos of Trevor and Simone at expensive restaurants. Screenshots of Trevor's social media posts showing off his new life. Credit card statements showing charges to Naomi's accounts for gifts Trevor had bought Simone. He'd spent over $15,000 of her money on jewelry, clothes, and dinners for another woman. Jordan sat across from her. "Do you want us to freeze the accounts?" "Not yet," Naomi said calmly. "Let him keep using them. It's more evidence of his character. Plus, $15,000 is pocket change to me. Let him think he's getting away with it." "You're remarkably calm about this." "I cried for 3 days straight," Naomi admitted. "I went through anger, grief, and betrayal. Now I'm just focused." He made his choice. He chose status over love, power over partnership. He thought he was trading up when really he threw away something priceless. "The audit is scheduled for 3 weeks from now," Jordan said. "TechVision's management has been notified, but it's framed as routine. Simone doesn't know she's being investigated specifically." "Good. What about Trevor's contract violations?" "Documented and ready. When the audit team reviews system access logs, his unauthorized file retrievals will be flagged immediately. He's been pulling confidential sales data, financial projections, and strategic plans that he has no business accessing." Naomi closed the folder. 3 weeks. Then this whole illusion collapses. "Are you ready for that?" Jordan asked gently. "When Trevor finds out who you really are, there's no going back. Your privacy will be gone. The media will cover this story." "I know." Naomi had thought about this constantly. Once the truth came out, her carefully guarded private life would become public knowledge. But staying silent meant letting Trevor and Simone continue their fraud. It meant letting them believe they'd won. She couldn't do that. "I'm ready," she said finally. Trevor thought he left an ordinary woman for someone extraordinary. It's time he learned the truth. He left someone extraordinary for someone criminal. Jordan smiled slightly. "I can't wait to see his face." "Neither can I," Naomi admitted. "Neither can I." The next 2 weeks passed in a careful balance of patience and preparation. Naomi maintained her public persona as Grace Collins, the woman Trevor had discarded. She went to work, managed her empire, and quietly gathered every piece of evidence she would need. Her forensic accounting team uncovered even more of Simone's fraud. The fake vendor accounts had been active for over a year, with payments totaling nearly $600,000. Simone had been careful, spreading the theft across multiple departments and keeping individual amounts small enough to avoid immediate attention. But Naomi's team was better. They traced every transaction, documented every fake invoice, and connected every shell company back to Simone's network. "She's got 3 different offshore accounts," the lead investigator, Patricia, explained during a meeting in Naomi's private office. "Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. She's been moving money between them to obscure the trail." "How did she think she wouldn't get caught eventually?" Naomi asked. Patricia shrugged. "Arrogance mostly. People who steal from companies often believe they're smarter than the system. They think if they just spread it out enough, keep the amount small enough, they'll slip through the cracks. But we own the system, Jordan added. Every transaction in every Bennett Global subsidiary goes through our monitoring software eventually. Simone just didn't know she was stealing from us. Naomi leaned back in her chair. What about Trevor's involvement? Can we prove he knew about the fraud? That's trickier, Patricia admitted. He definitely violated his employment contract by accessing restricted files and sharing confidential information. But we can't prove he knew Simone was stealing. He might have just been trying to impress her. Being stupid isn't illegal, Jordan muttered. No, but breach of contract is grounds for termination, Patricia continued. And depending on what information he shared, there could be legal consequences. Some of those files contain trade secrets and competitive strategy documents. Naomi pulled up Trevor's social media on her tablet. His most recent post showed him and Simone at a luxury spa resort. The caption read, "Weekend getaway with my queen. Living our best life." Comments from his friends ranged from supportive to confused. A few people had asked about Naomi, but Trevor hadn't responded to those. He was too busy crafting an image of success and happiness. He really believes he upgraded, Naomi said quietly, showing the post to Jordan. He's about to get the shock of his life, Jordan replied. That afternoon, Naomi did something she hadn't done in weeks. She left her office early and went to a salon. Not her usual place where stylists knew her as CEO Bennett. Instead, she went to a new place downtown where nobody recognized her. What are we doing today? The stylist, a woman named Carmen, asked. I want a change, Naomi said. Something that makes me feel powerful. 2 hours later, she walked out with a new look. Her natural hair was styled in a way that framed her face beautifully. She'd gotten a subtle makeover that enhanced her features. She'd bought a new wardrobe of power suits and jewel tones that made her feel confident and strong. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see Trevor's abandoned wife. She saw CEO Naomi Bennett. Strong, successful, unbreakable. That evening, she met with her divorce lawyer, Margaret Chin, at a private office. Trevor's attorney sent over the preliminary papers, Margaret said, sliding a folder across the desk. It's pretty straightforward. He's asking for a clean split, no alimony from either party, division of shared assets. He thinks I have minimal assets, Naomi said. Exactly. He has no idea you own this house outright. He thinks the car you drive is on a loan. He believes your savings account has maybe 50,000 in it. When actually I have 8 billion. Margaret smiled. When actually you have 8 billion. He's in for quite a surprise. I'll sign whatever he wants, Naomi said. Let him think he got a fair deal. The truth will come out soon enough. There's one thing, Margaret said carefully. Once this becomes public, and it will, Trevor could try to contest the divorce. He could claim fraud or concealment. We had a prenuptial agreement. Yes, but you signed it as Grace Collins, not Naomi Bennett. A good lawyer might argue that invalidates the agreement. Naomi had expected this. The prenup was written to protect assets brought into the marriage by either party. Every dollar I earned came from Bennett Global Solutions, a company I owned before I met Trevor. The prenup protects me regardless of what name I used. Legally, you're correct. But it could get messy. Let it get messy, Naomi said firmly. I'm done hiding who I am. I spent 5 years being someone smaller, someone less threatening because I wanted to be loved for myself. And look where that got me. Trevor left me anyway, not because of who I was, but because he thought someone else was better. Margaret nodded. Then I'll proceed with the divorce as planned. He gets nothing except what he brought into the marriage, which based on my records, was about 12,000 in savings and a 10-year-old car. Perfect. After the meeting, Naomi drove to her gym. She'd been working out regularly since Trevor left, channeling her pain and anger into physical strength. Tonight, she pushed herself harder than ever, running until her lungs burned and lifting weights until her muscles screamed. She wasn't doing this for Trevor. She was doing this for herself. She was becoming the person she should have been all along. Someone who didn't apologize for her success or hide her power. When she got home, exhausted and sweaty, she found an envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a note from Trevor. Naomi, I picked up the last of my things while you were out. I hope you understand why I had to leave. You're a good person, but we wanted different things. I need someone who matches my ambition. I hope you find someone at your level. Take care. Trevor. At her level. As if he was above her. As if he'd moved on to bigger and better things. Naomi read the note twice, then calmly tore it into small pieces and threw it in the trash. She didn't need his permission to move on. She didn't need his understanding or his pity. She had something much better. She had the truth. And in 1 week, when the audit began at TechVision Industries, that truth would start to come out. Piece by piece, the illusion Trevor and Simone had built would crumble. They thought they were living their best life. They thought they'd won. They had no idea they were living on borrowed time. Naomi pulled out her phone and called Jordan. Is everything ready for the audit? Everything's in place. The team arrives at TechVision Monday morning. They'll start with routine financial reviews and work their way through the departments. Based on what we know, they should flag Simone's accounts within 48 hours. And Trevor's contract violations? The IT audit is scheduled for Wednesday. His unauthorized access will be documented by end of day. Good. Naomi looked around her empty house. Soon it wouldn't feel empty anymore. Soon she would fill it with her real life, her real self. Naomi? Jordan said gently. Are you sure you want to be there when this happens? When Trevor finds out who you are? Naomi thought about this. Part of her wanted to see his face when he realized the truth. But another part of her, the stronger part, didn't need that satisfaction. No, she said finally. I don't need to see his reaction. I just need him to know. After that, what he does with the information is his problem, not mine. You're better than me, Jordan said. I'd want front row seats to his breakdown. Naomi smiled slightly. Oh, I'm sure someone will record it. This is going to be the biggest corporate scandal TechVision has ever seen. Trevor and Simone are about to become very famous for all the wrong reasons. Couldn't happen to more deserving people. After they hung up, Naomi walked through her house one last time as both Grace and Naomi. This space had held her double life for 5 years. Soon she wouldn't need the separation anymore. She stood in the bedroom where she'd found Trevor with Simone. The sheets had been changed, the room cleaned, but she could still remember that moment of devastating betrayal. But now, standing here stronger and clearer than ever, she realized something important. That moment hadn't broken her. It had freed her. Trevor had done her a favor by showing his true colors. Better to find out now than waste another 5 years on someone who valued status over substance. She would survive this. More than survive, she would thrive. And Trevor? Trevor was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. You don't leave a queen for a criminal. You just don't. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth. At TechVision Industries headquarters, employees filtered in for another week of work, most unaware that today would change everything. Trevor arrived early, riding the elevator to his new office on the executive floor. He'd been in this role for 3 weeks now and it still felt amazing. His office had his name on the door. People respected him. He had access to meetings that actually mattered. Simone was already at her desk when he passed her office. She waved him in. Morning, she said, looking stunning in a designer suit. Did you see the company-wide email? Trevor pulled out his phone and checked. Sure enough, there was a message from corporate headquarters. Notice: Bennett Global Solutions will be conducting a routine quarterly audit of TechVision Industries beginning today. All employees are expected to cooperate fully with the audit team. Department heads should prepare all financial records, system access logs, and project documentation for review. It's just standard procedure, Trevor said. They do this every quarter, right? Usually, yes. Simone looked slightly uncomfortable. But this notice is more detailed than usual. And it specifically mentions system access logs. So, we don't have anything to hide. Simone's expression flickered with something Trevor couldn't quite read. Of course not. I'm just saying we should make sure all our documentation is perfect. Corporate auditors love finding tiny mistakes to justify their jobs. My files are clean, Trevor assured her. Everything I've done has been to help the company succeed. I know. I'm not worried about you. But her tone suggested she was worried about something. Trevor kissed her cheek. Stop stressing. This audit will come and go just like all the others. We're doing great work here. At 9 a.m. the audit team arrived. 6 people in business attire, carrying tablets and briefcases, led by a man named Robert who introduced himself as the senior auditor. They set up in a conference room and began requesting files. By Tuesday afternoon, Trevor noticed increased tension among the executive staff. Simone was in back-to-back meetings with the auditors. Other department heads were called in for interviews. The normally busy office had become eerily quiet as people whispered about what the auditors might find. Trevor wasn't worried. He'd been helpful to Simone, sure, but everything he'd done was to make the company better. The auditors would see that. Wednesday morning he was called into the conference room. Robert and another auditor, a woman named Susan, sat across from him with serious expressions. "Trevor, thank you for meeting with us," Robert said. "We need to ask you about your system access over the past 6 months." "Okay," Trevor said, confused. "What about it?" Susan pulled up a document on her tablet. "Our IT security team has flagged multiple instances of you accessing files outside your clearance level. Financial projections, strategic planning documents, competitive analysis reports. Can you explain why you needed access to these files?" Trevor felt a flutter of nervousness but pushed it down. "I was gathering data for Simone, for Director Fields. She needed the information for her division's strategic planning." "Did Director Fields request these specific files?" "She told me what kind of information she needed, and I pulled the reports that seemed relevant." Robert and Susan exchanged glances. "Did you have written authorization to access these files?" No. "But Simone, Director Fields approved everything I did." "We'll need to verify that with her," Robert said, making notes. "In the meantime, were you aware that some of these files contain trade secrets and proprietary information that could be damaging if shared outside the company?" Trevor's mouth went dry. "I didn't share anything outside the company. I gave everything directly to Director Fields." "Did you send any files to her personal email?" "A few times, yes. She was working from home and needed access to the data." More note-taking. "Thank you, Trevor. We may have additional questions later. Please don't discuss this conversation with other employees." Trevor left the conference room feeling sick. What had started as routine suddenly felt serious. He wanted to talk to Simone, but she was in another audit meeting and had been for hours. By Thursday, the entire office was on edge. Security personnel had been seen escorting people from the building. Rumor had it that several employees were suspended pending investigation. Trevor finally caught Simone in her office Thursday evening. She looked exhausted and stressed. "What's going on?" he asked, closing the door. "The auditors asked me about system access. They made it sound like I did something wrong." Simone rubbed her temples. "It's bad, Trevor. They found discrepancies in department finances. They're looking at everything." "What kind of discrepancies?" "I don't know all the details yet, but they're questioning expense reports and vendor payments." She looked at him seriously. "If they ask you about anything I requested, just be honest. Say I approved everything. This is just corporate being paranoid about normal business practices." "Are you in trouble?" "I don't know yet." She stood and gathered her things. "Look, I need to meet with my lawyer tonight. Don't worry about any of this. It will blow over." But Trevor was worried. Something felt very wrong. Friday morning, the entire executive staff was called into a meeting. Trevor, as a senior manager now, was included. They gathered in the large conference room, where Robert and his audit team waited with grave expressions. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began. "We've completed our preliminary audit of TechVision Industries. We've found significant evidence of financial fraud, data breaches, and contract violations. Several employees are being terminated effective immediately." A shocked murmur went through the room. "Additionally," Robert continued, "we've been informed that CEO Naomi Bennett of Bennett Global Solutions will be personally addressing this matter. She'll be joining us Monday morning for a full company meeting. Attendance is mandatory for all staff." Trevor felt his world tilt. Naomi Bennett, the CEO of their parent company. The woman was a legend in the industry, known for being brilliant and ruthless. She almost never visited subsidiary companies in person. Why was she coming now? "The CEO?" someone asked. "Why would she come here personally?" "That will be addressed Monday," Robert said. "Until then, consider yourselves on notice. Anyone involved in the activities we've uncovered will face serious consequences." The meeting ended with everyone looking shell-shocked. Trevor walked back to his office in a daze. The CEO was coming. The actual CEO of the entire corporation. This was so much bigger than he'd realized. He tried calling Simone, but she didn't answer. He texted her, "We need to talk. This is serious." Her response came an hour later, "Meeting with lawyers all weekend. Don't panic. We'll get through this." But Trevor was panicking. He'd pulled files he wasn't supposed to access. He'd shared confidential information. He'd done it all at Simone's request, but could he prove that? He spent the weekend going through emails and messages, trying to find evidence that Simone had approved his actions. But most of their conversations had been in person or over the phone. There was no paper trail. By Monday morning, Trevor's anxiety had reached crisis levels. He arrived at work early to find the building already buzzing with nervous energy. Security was tighter than usual. The conference room had been set up theater style with rows of chairs facing a podium. Simone arrived looking pale but composed. She squeezed Trevor's hand briefly. "Whatever happens, we're in this together," she whispered. At 9 a.m. sharp, the doors opened and the audit team entered, followed by several people in expensive suits who were clearly lawyers. And then she walked in. Naomi Bennett. Trevor had seen her picture in business magazines. She was young for a CEO, probably mid-30s, and known for being both brilliant and beautiful. But seeing her in person was different. She commanded the room instantly. She wore a sapphire blue suit that probably cost more than Trevor's monthly salary. Her natural hair was styled elegantly. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew she was the most powerful person in any space she entered. She stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled employees. Her eyes scanned the room, professional and assessing. And then her gaze landed on Trevor. For a split second, just a fraction of a moment, something flickered across her face. Recognition? No, that was impossible. They'd never met. But Trevor felt a strange chill run down his spine as Naomi Bennett's eyes locked onto his. Then she looked away, focusing on the room at large, and began to speak. "Good morning," Naomi said, her voice carrying clearly through the conference room. "I'm Naomi Bennett, CEO of Bennett Global Solutions. I don't typically attend subsidiary audits, but the findings here warrant my personal attention." Trevor couldn't shake the feeling he'd just had when she'd looked at him. Something about her eyes. "Over the past week," Naomi continued, "our audit team uncovered serious violations of company policy, breach of fiduciary duty, and outright fraud. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from this company. From all of you." Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. Simone sat perfectly still beside Trevor, her face unreadable. Naomi pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. "Let me show you exactly what we found." The first slide showed a series of expense reports. These are charges submitted by Simone Fields, your regional director, over the past 18 months. Personal shopping trips billed as client entertainment. Luxury vacations disguised as business travel. Designer clothes claimed as professional development expenses. Total fraudulent expenses, $397,000. The room erupted. People turned to stare at Simone, who had gone completely white. "That's not all," Naomi said, her voice cutting through the noise. Director Fields also created multiple fake vendor accounts, submitting false invoices for services never rendered. These payments went to offshore accounts under her control. Total embezzlement, $612,000. Simone stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I demand to speak with my lawyer." "You'll have that opportunity soon," Naomi said calmly. "Security is waiting outside to escort you to a meeting with law enforcement. You're being terminated effective immediately and will face criminal charges." Two security officers entered and moved towards Simone. She looked around desperately, her composure finally cracking. "Trevor?" she gasped, reaching for him. "Trevor, tell them this is a mistake." But Trevor couldn't speak. He was frozen, watching his girlfriend, the woman he'd left his wife for, being revealed as a criminal. As security led Simone toward the door, she tried one more time. "You can't do this. I have rights. I'll sue you. You'll have your day in court," Naomi said. "But you won't have another day in my company." The doors closed behind Simone, leaving stunned silence. Naomi turned back to the presentation. Unfortunately, Director Fields wasn't working alone. She had help from someone who provided her with confidential files and restricted data. Trevor's heart stopped. "Trevor Mitchell," Naomi said, and every eye in the room turned to him. "Over the past 6 months, you accessed files far above your clearance level. Financial projections, strategic plans, competitive analysis, trade secrets. You forwarded these files to Director Fields' personal email, violating your employment contract and company security protocols." Trevor tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't work. "You shared proprietary information that could have severely damaged this company if it had fallen into competitor hands. Whether you knew about Director Fields' criminal activities or not, your actions constitute gross misconduct and breach of contract." Trevor finally found his voice. "I was just trying to help. She told me she needed that information for her work." "Did you have written authorization to access those files?" "No, but she approved." "She approved nothing in writing. You acted without proper authorization, and you're responsible for your choices." Naomi's voice was firm but not cruel. "You're being terminated effective immediately. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Security will escort you out." Trevor felt like he was drowning. This couldn't be happening. Just last week he'd been promoted. He'd been successful. He'd been winning. "Please," he said desperately as security approached him. "Please, I didn't know she was stealing. I was just trying to do a good job. I thought I was helping the company." "Your intentions don't change the outcome," Naomi said. "You violated company policy and your employment contract. The decision is final." As security took his arm, Trevor looked at Naomi Bennett one more time. Really looked at her. And that's when he saw it. Her eyes. The shape of her face. The way she held herself. No, it couldn't be. "Wait," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know you." Naomi's expression didn't change. "I don't believe we've met, Mr. Mitchell." "Your voice," Trevor said, his mind racing. "Your eyes. You look like..." And then it hit him like a physical blow. Grace. His wife. The woman he'd left 3 weeks ago. But that was impossible. Grace was a mid-level manager at some consulting firm. She drove a 6-year-old Honda. She lived in a suburban house and shopped at Target. She wasn't Naomi Bennett. She wasn't a billionaire CEO. She couldn't be. But as Trevor stared at her, pieces started clicking into place. Grace's frequent business trips. Her vague descriptions of her work. The way she'd always had money but never showed it off. The private office in their house he'd never been allowed to enter. "Grace," he whispered. The room went completely silent. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice clear and steady. "My full name is Naomi Grace Bennett. But yes, Trevor, I'm your wife. Or soon-to-be ex-wife, since you already sent divorce papers." The shock that went through Trevor was indescribable. The room spun. He couldn't breathe. "You're..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm the CEO of the company that owns TechVision Industries," Naomi said. "I'm the billionaire you read about in business magazines. I'm the woman who built an empire from nothing. And I'm the wife you abandoned 3 weeks ago for someone you thought was more successful than me." Trevor's legs gave out. Security caught him before he fell. "The irony," Naomi continued, "is that you left me because you wanted to be with someone powerful. Someone important. Someone who matched your ambitions. You left me for your boss thinking you were trading up. But your boss was just a regional director making $300,000 a year while stealing another $600,000. Meanwhile, the woman you left? She's worth $8 billion. The numbers didn't make sense in Trevor's head. $8 billion. His wife was worth $8 billion. "Why?" he finally managed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to know if you loved me for me," Naomi said simply. "I wanted to know if you'd stay with Grace Collins, the ordinary woman, or if you'd leave the moment you thought someone better came along. Now I know. You couldn't leave fast enough." Trevor felt tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "You didn't know I was rich," Naomi corrected. "But you knew you were abandoning your wife for someone you thought had more status. You knew you were betraying 5 years of marriage for a woman who represented power and success. The specific numbers don't change what you did." "Please," Trevor begged. "Please, Naomi Grace, whoever you are. Please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll do anything." "You'll do nothing," Naomi said firmly. "You made your choice. You threw away our marriage, called me inadequate, and mocked me to your friends on social media. You spent my money buying gifts for another woman. You violated your employment contract trying to impress someone you thought was important. These are your consequences." Security began leading Trevor toward the door. He looked back at Naomi one more time, seeing her clearly for the first time. She was magnificent, powerful, successful. Everything he'd claimed to want. And he'd thrown her away. "I loved you," he said, his voice breaking. "I really did love you." Naomi's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "No, Trevor. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a wife who was safe and comfortable and didn't threaten your ego. But the moment you thought someone better came along, you left without hesitation. That's not love. That's convenience." The doors closed behind Trevor, cutting off his view of her. In the conference room, Naomi took a deep breath and looked at the remaining employees. "I understand this has been a shocking morning. The rest of you are not in trouble. We simply wanted to address these issues directly and decisively. TechVision Industries will continue operating normally, and we'll be appointing new leadership shortly. Does anyone have questions?" A young woman in the back raised her hand tentatively. "I just want to say, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen." The room erupted in nervous laughter and applause. Naomi smiled slightly. "Thank you. Now let's get back to work. We have a company to run." As the meeting dispersed, Jordan approached her boss. "Are you okay?" Naomi nodded. "I'm better than okay. That needed to happen." Trevor needed to know the truth. "His face when he realized who you were," Jordan said. "That's a moment I'll remember forever." "Me too," Naomi admitted. "But not because of revenge. Because I finally stood in front of him as my whole self. No hiding. No pretending to be smaller than I am. Just me. He's going to regret this for the rest of his life." "Probably," Naomi agreed. "But that's not my problem anymore. He made his choice. Now he gets to live with it." Outside the building, Trevor sat in his car in the parking lot, unable to move. His phone buzzed constantly, texts from coworkers, notifications from social media, messages from family members who'd somehow already heard the news. He'd left a billionaire for a criminal. He'd destroyed his career for a woman who used him. He'd thrown away a marriage to someone extraordinary because he'd been too shallow to see what he had. And there was no way to fix it. No way to undo what he'd done. Trevor put his head on the steering wheel and finally let himself cry. The next 72 hours were the worst of Trevor's life. News of the TechVision scandal spread quickly through industry circles. Within hours, his name was attached to headlines: CEO's ex-husband involved in corporate fraud scheme. Man leaves billionaire wife for embezzler. The most expensive mistake in dating history. Trevor's social media accounts, which he'd used to brag about his new life with Simone, became evidence of his character. Screenshots of his posts: "Living my best life, upgraded to someone who appreciates me, no regrets," were shared thousands of times, always accompanied by commentary about his spectacular failure in judgment. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends called to ask if the news was true. His mother called crying, demanding to know why he'd left Naomi. Former colleagues called to distance themselves from him professionally. And lawyers called, because Simone's defense team was trying to claim Trevor had been an equal participant in her crimes. By Thursday, Trevor had stopped answering his phone entirely. He sat in the penthouse apartment he'd shared with Simone for 3 weeks, which was actually a corporate rental that would be taken away now that she was terminated. He had nowhere to go. The house he'd shared with Naomi was hers. He knew that now. Everything was hers. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral of misery. He opened it to find a man in a suit holding a manila envelope. "Trevor Mitchell? You've been served." Trevor took the envelope with numb hands. Inside were official court documents. Simone was suing him, claiming he'd been aware of her fraudulent activities and should share responsibility for her legal fees. She was also suing Naomi personally, claiming the termination was unjust. Trevor read the documents twice, not quite believing them. Simone was trying to drag him down with her. The woman he'd left his wife for, the woman he'd violated his employment contract for, was now throwing him under the bus to save herself. His phone buzzed. A text from Simone: "I'm sorry, but my lawyer says this is the best strategy. You understand, right? We both need to protect ourselves." Trevor stared at the message. 3 weeks ago she'd been calling him darling and talking about their future together. Now she was accusing him of crimes he didn't commit. He called her. She answered on the first ring. "Simone, what are you doing? I didn't know about any of the embezzlement. My lawyer says otherwise." Her voice was cold, nothing like the warm tone she'd used with him before. "You had access to files. You sent me information. That makes you complicit. I was trying to help you. You told me you needed that data. I never asked you to breach company security. That was your choice." She paused. "Look, Trevor, we had fun. But this is business now. I need to minimize my liability, and that means showing you were involved in the decision-making." "I loved you," Trevor said desperately. "I left my wife for you." "You left a woman you thought was boring for someone you thought was powerful," Simone corrected. "Don't pretend it was about love. You wanted status and I gave you that. Now we're both paying the price." She hung up. Trevor sat in silence, finally understanding the full scope of his stupidity. He'd thrown away a real relationship for an illusion. He'd traded someone who genuinely cared for him for someone who'd been using him all along. The next morning his lawyer called. Margaret, the same attorney who was handling Naomi's divorce. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm calling as a courtesy. Mrs. Bennett wanted you to know that she will not be pursuing additional legal action against you beyond the termination of your employment." "She's not suing me?" Trevor asked, surprised. "No. However, she wants to clarify several things. First, the prenuptial agreement you signed is ironclad. You receive nothing from the divorce except your personal belongings. Second, all the credit cards you've been using belong to her. She's canceling them effective immediately. Third, the car you've been driving is registered in her name. It needs to be returned by end of business tomorrow. Trevor felt sick. The car too. Yes. She purchased it 3 years ago and registered it in her name for insurance purposes. You're welcome to retrieve your personal items from it, but the vehicle itself must be returned. After Margaret hung up, Trevor looked around the penthouse. All the furniture was corporate property or Simone's. The expensive clothes in the closet had been bought with Naomi's credit cards. The watch on his wrist had been a gift from Simone, probably purchased with embezzled funds. He owned almost nothing. His bank account had less than $3,000. No job, no home, no car, and no prospects because no reputable company would hire someone terminated for security breaches and associated with fraud. His phone rang again. This time it was his mother. "Trevor James Mitchell," she said when he answered, her voice tight with emotion. "You have exactly one chance to explain to me why you left the most wonderful woman in the world for a criminal." "Mom? I loved Naomi like she was my own daughter. She was kind, generous, thoughtful. She remembered everyone's birthdays. She helped your grandmother with her medical bills without telling anyone. She was perfect and you threw her away like she was garbage. I didn't know who she really was." "That's exactly the problem," his mother shouted. "You didn't know her because you never bothered to really see her. You were so busy wanting more, wanting better, that you didn't appreciate what you had." Trevor couldn't argue because she was right. "Your father and I are ashamed of you," his mother continued. "Naomi called us yesterday. Do you know what she said? She apologized. She apologized to us for the scandal, even though none of this is her fault. She said she hoped we wouldn't think badly of her for keeping her identity private." "What did you say?" "I told her we love her and we're proud of her for being strong enough to let you go. I told her she deserves so much better than you." His mother's voice broke. "And then I cried because we lost her when you divorced her and she was the best thing that ever happened to our family." "Mom, please. Don't call me for a while, Trevor. I need time to process my disappointment." She hung up. Trevor spent the next week moving into a cheap apartment across town. His parents refused to let him move back home, teaching him what they called a necessary lesson. His friends slowly stopped calling. Job applications were rejected as soon as employers Googled his name. Simone was arrested and released on bail, immediately going on local news to claim she was innocent and being framed. She mentioned Trevor by name multiple times, painting him as a co-conspirator who'd helped her in exchange for their relationship. The media loved the story. It had everything: a billionaire CEO, betrayal, corporate fraud, and a man who'd made the stupidest decision in modern romance. Trevor's social media accounts, which he'd deleted, were preserved and shared by others. Every boastful post, every jab at his boring old life, every picture with Simone was dissected and mocked by thousands of strangers. He became a cautionary tale. A meme. A punchline. "Did you hear about the guy who left a billionaire for an embezzler? Imagine being too dumb to realize your wife is the CEO of your company's parent corporation." He really posted no regrets 3 days before his entire life imploded. Trevor deleted all social media and stopped reading news. But he couldn't escape the consequences of his choices. His lawyer called again with updates on the divorce. It was progressing smoothly because Naomi wasn't fighting anything. She just wanted it done. "Does she want to talk to me?" Trevor asked desperately. "Can I apologize to her at least?" "Mr. Mitchell," the lawyer said patiently, "Mrs. Bennett has no interest in communicating with you. She's moving forward with her life. I'd suggest you do the same." But how could he move forward when he destroyed everything? Trevor sat in his tiny apartment, surrounded by the few possessions he actually owned, and faced the truth. He'd had something real with Naomi. A partnership. A marriage built on trust and companionship. And he'd thrown it away because he'd valued appearances over substance. He'd wanted a powerful woman and he'd had one. He just hadn't known it. Now she was gone, and he was left with nothing but his own regret. Somewhere across the city, in a building he'd never be allowed to enter again, Naomi Bennett was living her life. Being successful. Being powerful. Being everything he'd claimed to want. And he would never be part of that world again. The realization broke something fundamental inside Trevor. He'd destroyed his own happiness because he'd been too shallow to see what he had. There was no coming back from this. No redemption arc. No second chance. Just consequences. And they would last the rest of his life. 2 months after the confrontation, Naomi stood in front of a packed auditorium at the Women in Business conference. The audience was full of aspiring female entrepreneurs, many of whom had traveled from across the country to hear her speak. People ask me all the time how I built Bennett Global Solutions, Naomi said into the microphone. They want to know the business strategy, the funding sources, the networking secrets. But today I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about knowing your worth. She paused, letting the words sink in. 6 months ago I was living a double life. I ran a billion-dollar company, but my husband knew me as Grace Collins, a mid-level manager with a boring job. I hid who I was because I wanted to be loved for myself, not for my money or power. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. And then my husband left me for someone he thought was more successful. He left me for his boss, a woman he believed represented everything I wasn't. Power, status, importance. Naomi smiled slightly. What he didn't know was that I owned the company his boss worked for. I was the actual CEO. I was the one with real power. Appreciative laughter rippled through the crowd. When I confronted him, when he finally saw who I really was, he was devastated. He begged for another chance. He said he'd made a mistake. Naomi's expression turned serious. But here's what I learned. Someone who only values you when they realize you're worth something never valued you at all. Real love sees worth in the person, not the position. The audience applauded. So I started the Bennett Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. We provide grants, mentorship, and resources to women who've survived financial abuse, betrayal, or discrimination. Women who've been told they're not enough, not smart enough, not valuable enough. We help them build businesses and reclaim their power. The applause grew louder. In 3 months, we've helped 247 women start or expand their businesses. We've provided over $2 million in grants. We've created a network of support that says, your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Naomi stepped away from the podium, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. After her speech, she did interviews and met with attendees. One young woman, tears in her eyes, thanked her for sharing her story. My ex-husband controlled all our finances, the woman said. He made me think I was stupid and worthless. Your foundation gave me a grant to start my catering business. Now I employ 6 people and I'm completely independent. That's exactly why we do this, Naomi said, genuinely moved. Your success is the best revenge. As the conference wrapped up, Jordan approached with a reminder. You have dinner with Isaiah tonight. 7 p.m. at Meridian. Thank you. Naomi checked her watch. She had just enough time to go home and change. She'd met Isaiah Thompson 3 weeks after the confrontation at TechVision. He'd been a speaker at a charity gala benefiting economic development programs. An architect who owned his own firm, he'd built his career on sustainable design and community-focused projects. They'd been seated next to each other at dinner and had fallen into easy conversation. Isaiah had been charming and respectful, asking about her work without being intimidated by her success. He'd shared stories about his own career challenges, including a business partner who'd tried to steal his designs and take credit for his work. Betrayal teaches you who to trust, he'd said that night. And more importantly, it teaches you to trust yourself. That resonated with Naomi deeply. They'd exchanged numbers, started with coffee meetings, and gradually developed a genuine friendship. Isaiah never treated her wealth or position as the most interesting thing about her. He asked about her thoughts, her passions, her dreams beyond business. He made her feel seen. Tonight, they were meeting at one of the city's best restaurants. Naomi arrived wearing a simple but elegant dress, her confidence radiating naturally now. She no longer felt the need to hide or diminish herself. Isaiah was already there, standing when she approached the table. He was handsome in a classic way, tall, well-dressed, with warm eyes and an easy smile. You look beautiful, he said, pulling out her chair. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. They ordered wine and dinner, falling into their usual comfortable conversation. Isaiah told her about his current project, a community center in an underserved neighborhood. Naomi shared updates about the foundation and her conference speech. I saw clips online, Isaiah said. You were incredible. The way you turned your pain into purpose, that's rare. I learned from the best, Naomi said. Your work with community projects inspired me. You put your values into action instead of just talking about them. We make a good team then, Isaiah said, and something in his tone made Naomi look up. He was watching her with an expression she'd seen growing stronger over the past few weeks. Admiration, respect, and something deeper. Naomi, he said carefully, I want to be clear about something. I know you're still processing your divorce. I know you're focused on your work in the foundation. But I need you to know that I'm interested in more than friendship. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to explore where this could go. Naomi's heart beat faster. She'd been avoiding thinking about this possibility, afraid to trust again after Trevor's betrayal. I don't need you to answer now, Isaiah continued. I just wanted to be honest. You deserve someone who's upfront about their intentions. Thank you, Naomi said softly. For being patient. For being honest. For seeing me. You're pretty hard to miss, Isaiah said with a gentle smile. They finished dinner talking about lighter topics, but something had shifted between them. A door had opened to new possibilities. As Isaiah walked her to her car, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the desperate hope that Trevor would realize his mistake, but genuine hope for something new and healthy. Can I see you this weekend? Isaiah asked. I'd like that, Naomi replied. He kissed her cheek softly, a gentleman's gesture that respected her boundaries. Good night, Naomi. Driving home, Naomi thought about how different this felt from her relationship with Trevor. With Isaiah, there was no game playing, no status seeking, no hidden agendas. Just two successful people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company and respected each other's accomplishments. This was what partnership should feel like. Equal. Honest. Supportive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Simone's trial date was set. 3 months from now. Naomi replied, Thank you for the update. Please forward all future information directly to my legal team. I don't need to be personally involved. She was done letting Trevor and Simone occupy space in her mind. They'd made their choices. They were facing their consequences. That chapter of her life was closed. When she got home, Naomi walked through her house without the weight of sadness she'd carried for months. This was her space now. Her home. Not a reminder of betrayal, but a foundation for her future. She changed into comfortable clothes and settled into her home office, reviewing applications for the foundation's next grant cycle. Each application represented a woman's dream, a second chance, a new beginning. Just like Naomi's own new beginning. She'd learned that she didn't need to hide who she was to be loved. She didn't need to be smaller or less successful to make someone else comfortable. The right person would celebrate her success, not resent it. And maybe, just maybe, Isaiah Thompson was that person. But even if it didn't work out with him, Naomi knew she'd be fine. Better than fine. She'd survived betrayal. She'd built an empire. She'd turned her pain into purpose. She was Naomi Bennett. Geo. Philanthropist. Survivor. And she was just getting started. 6 months after the confrontation at Tech Vision Industries, Naomi stood backstage at the International Business Summit in New York City. She was the keynote speaker, invited to address thousands of business leaders from around the world. Jordan appeared beside her, holding a tablet. You're trending on social media. Everyone's excited to hear you speak. No pressure, Naomi said with a slight smile. You've got this. You always do. Jordan hesitated. There's something else. Trevor was spotted outside the building earlier. Security removed him, but I thought you should know. Naomi felt nothing at the mention of his name. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just a mild acknowledgement that he still existed somewhere in the world. Is he gone now? Yes. He tried to claim he was a credentialed attendee, but obviously that didn't work. Thank you for handling it. Naomi checked her reflection one more time. She looked powerful and professional in a tailored suit. Her natural hair was styled beautifully. She wore the confidence of someone who'd faced their worst fear and survived. The announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. Please welcome our keynote speaker, CEO of Bennett Global Solutions and founder of the Bennett Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs, Naomi Bennett. Naomi walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience of 3,000 stood as she approached the podium. She waited for the noise to die down, taking in the moment. 2 years ago, she'd been hiding her identity from her husband. Now she was standing in front of the world's business elite as exactly who she was. Thank you, she said into the microphone. I'm honored to be here today. I want to talk to you about authenticity in business and life. For 45 minutes, she spoke about her journey. Building her company from nothing. Hiding her success out of fear. Being betrayed by someone who couldn't see her value. And finally, reclaiming her identity and using her experience to help others. The Bennett Foundation has now helped over 800 women start or expand businesses, she announced. We've distributed over $15 million in grants. We've created a network of support that spans 6 continents. And we're just getting started. The applause was deafening. But more than the numbers, what I'm most proud of is this. We've helped women remember their worth. We've shown them that betrayal doesn't define them, that their value doesn't depend on someone else's ability to recognize it, that they can build something extraordinary from the ashes of their pain. After her speech, Naomi did media interviews and posed for photos. Every major business publication wanted a quote. Every news outlet wanted her perspective. She handled it all with grace and poise. As she was leaving the conference center, her security team flanking her, someone called her name. Naomi. Please, just 1 minute. She turned to see Trevor pushing through the crowd, security trying to intercept him. Please, he said desperately. I just need to talk to you for 1 minute. Naomi nodded to her security. It's fine. Give us a moment. They stepped aside, staying close enough to intervene if needed. Trevor looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His clothes were cheap and ill-fitting. He had dark circles under his eyes. Thank you, he said breathlessly. I've been trying to reach you for months. I know. I've been declining all your attempts. I need you to know how sorry I am. How much I regret everything. I was an idiot. I was blind. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too stupid to see what I had. Naomi looked at him calmly. I know. Is there any chance, any possibility at all, that we could try again? I know I don't deserve it. I know I hurt you. But I love you, Naomi. I always loved you. No, Trevor. You didn't. Naomi's voice was gentle but firm. You loved the idea of me when I was safe and small and didn't threaten your ego. And you loved the idea of Simone when you thought she represented power and status. But you never actually loved people for who they are. You loved what you thought they could do for you. That's not true, he protested weakly. It is true. And somewhere deep down, you know it. Naomi adjusted her bag on her shoulder. I spent 5 years trying to be small enough for you to love. I hid my success, my power, my true self because I thought that's what I needed to do to be loved. But I was wrong. I didn't need to be smaller. I just needed someone capable of loving all of me. I can be that person now, Trevor said. I've learned. I've grown. I'm glad you've grown. Truly. But you're not my responsibility anymore. You made your choice 6 months ago when you threw our wedding ring at my feet and left with another woman. You don't get to unmake that choice now that you've realized what you lost. Please, Naomi. Trevor's voice broke. I have nothing. No job, no money, no future. Everything fell apart. I'm sorry you're struggling. Genuinely. But I'm not going to save you. Naomi looked at him with something close to pity. You need to save yourself, Trevor. You need to figure out who you are without defining yourself by who you're with or what status you have. That's work you have to do alone. I made one mistake, he said desperately. One mistake and I'm paying for it for the rest of my life. You made many mistakes, Naomi corrected gently. Leaving me was just the final one. You spent years valuing status over substance. You violated professional ethics. You betrayed trust. These aren't mistakes, Trevor. They're patterns of behavior. She signaled to her security that she was ready to go. Wait, Trevor grabbed her arm, then immediately let go when security moved forward. Just tell me one thing. Did you ever really love me? Or was this all just a test I failed? Naomi considered the question seriously. I loved you very much. I loved you enough to hide who I was so you wouldn't feel intimidated. I loved you enough to want you to love the real me. But you couldn't do that because you didn't know how. And that's sad, Trevor. It's sad for both of us. What about you? Trevor asked. Are you happy now? Did destroying my life make you happy? I didn't destroy your life. You did that yourself. Naomi's voice remained calm. And yes, I'm happy. Happier than I've ever been. I'm dating someone who celebrates my success instead of resenting it. I'm running a foundation that helps women reclaim their power. I'm living as my authentic self without apology. Who are you dating? Trevor asked, his face crumpling. That's none of your business. Naomi turned to leave, then paused. Trevor, I genuinely hope you figure yourself out. I hope you learn to value people for who they are, not what they can do for you. I hope you find happiness that doesn't depend on status or appearance. But I won't be part of that journey. Goodbye. She walked away, flanked by security, and didn't look back. Trevor stood in the street, watching her go. The woman he'd thrown away. The woman who'd been everything he claimed to want. The woman he'd been too blind to appreciate. Gone. Meanwhile, Naomi climbed into her waiting car and immediately felt the weight lift. That conversation had been necessary closure. Trevor had needed to hear her truth and she'd needed to speak it. But now it was over. Truly over. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isaiah. Saw your keynote online. You were brilliant. Dinner tonight to celebrate? Naomi smiled and typed back, I'd love that. 3 hours later, she sat across from Isaiah at an intimate restaurant, candlelight reflecting off wine glasses. They'd been dating officially for 3 months now, and everything felt natural and right. I'm proud of you, Isaiah said, reaching across the table to take her hand. What you've built with the foundation, what you've overcome personally. You're incredible. I learned from the best, Naomi replied. You taught me that success means nothing if you can't share it with others. Your community projects inspired the entire foundation model. We make a good team. We really do. Isaiah squeezed her hand gently. I love you, Naomi. I know it's only been 3 months, but I need you to know. I love your strength, your compassion, your brilliance. I love all of you. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too. It was the first time she'd said those words since Trevor left. But they felt different now. More real. More true. Because Isaiah loved Naomi Bennett, CEO and billionaire and force of nature. He didn't need her to be smaller. He celebrated every part of her success. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Later that night, Naomi stood in her home office, looking at the wall where she'd once hidden magazine covers featuring her face. She'd taken them down months ago. She didn't need to hide anymore. On her desk was a letter from a grant recipient, a woman who'd left an abusive marriage and used the foundation's support to start a graphic design business. You saved my life, the letter said. Not just financially but by showing me I could be strong. Thank you. Naomi kept all these letters. They reminded her why the pain had been worth it. Why Trevor's betrayal, as devastating as it was at the time, had ultimately freed her to become exactly who she was meant to be. She pulled up the news on her tablet. There was an article about Simone's trial. She'd been convicted of fraud and embezzlement, sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution. Her career was destroyed. Her reputation was ruined. Trevor wasn't mentioned in the article, but Naomi knew he was out there somewhere, working a low-level job, struggling to rebuild his life. Part of her felt compassion for him. But mostly she just felt indifferent. He'd made his choices. She'd made hers. And her choices had led her here, to a life beyond her wildest dreams. To love that empowered instead of diminished. To purpose that mattered. To authenticity that felt like freedom. Naomi Bennett had built an empire. But more importantly, she'd built herself. She was no longer the woman who hid her success to make others comfortable. She was no longer the wife who accepted less than she deserved. She was powerful. She was authentic. She was free. And she was exactly where she belonged. Trevor had left her thinking he was trading up. But really he'd thrown away a queen for absolutely nothing. That was his loss to carry. Naomi had already moved on to better things. She closed her laptop, turned off the lights and went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new ways to make a difference. But tonight she would sleep peacefully, knowing that she'd won. Not by destroying Trevor, but by becoming fully, unapologetically herself. And that was the best victory of all.